So this is our first ever Crappie Co. video podcast that we're going to be doing, and it's a little difficult because we all live in different places across Texas. One of the things that we are going to be doing is video meetups and talking about different things that everyone's seeing on the water, talking about upcoming tournaments, talking about past tournaments, and really anything related to crappie anglers of Texas, crappie fishing in general. Here today we got Lieutenant Dan with Crappie Co. and we got Damon. Damon, how do you pronounce your last name? I've always troubled with it.
Remillard.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Remillard. All right. So the first thing I want to ask you all is, where's the spring spawn? Right? How close are we to spring spawn? Are y'all already seeing it starting? What temperatures? How much longer, if not, until we are there?
I'll go. The couple lakes that I've been fishing in North Texas, primarily Ray Roberts, Lake Louisville as well. I have ventured off to Lake Palestine, Lake. What was that other lake? Crap. We just had another tournament there. Tyler, stuff like that. I've seen spawning fish since as early as the end of January. I was catching fish in 3 foot of water, dumping eggs. No males around. But now we're starting to see a bunch of males show up, and I'm catching them in shallows 1.5 foot of water all the way out. Today with clients, we were catching males in 26 foot of water, 3 foot underneath the surface. No telling if those fish are actually trying to spawn in the top of the trees, but I have seen it in the past. Water temp is roughly about 62 degrees on Ray Roberts. It did drop the last couple of days back down to about 58. And it's going to not necessarily hold off the spawn, but what I'm seeing is those fish are moving to warm water. They're trying to find a consistent water temperature, whether it be shallower water on flats that heats up faster, or they're actually going down and sinking in the mud down to 18 foot of water in the mud. And that mud doesn't seem to change temperature as much, so they're more comfortable down in it. I have been seeing eggs being dumped out in the cooler when we throw fish in the cooler, and they're just can't hold on to them any longer. They're there. It's a little earlier than most years that I've seen on Ray Roberts, and we hopefully it's a good one. If we don't get a bunch of rain to push them back out of the creeks and those shallow waters, we'll get a good spawn and have a very, very healthy year, because I always feel like the earlier the spawn, the better the population does the years following. And it's going to be a good one.
Damon, what are you seeing regarding spring or temperatures and movement?
That's pretty much accurate. I mean, I haven't fished the whole month. I've only been on port the last couple of weeks. And then again, I did that thing to it. But
Oh, baby.
it's 60, 65 degree water. I fished from like 9 to 18 feet. What I was pretty much covered the last couple of trips. Same thing. I mean, fish are spawning. I actually didn't catch very many males 2 weeks ago. More females. And then Sunday I went. Leave my hands lumped like this. And they were definitely full of eggs and ready to go. I mean, I took a buddy with me, and he wanted to keep fish. So I was like, bring a cooler for however many you want to keep, and we'll put a limit in it, sure, or whatever.
Yeah.
And we did. And I mean, it almost reminded me of Palestine last year, because this year you didn't see it as much because of the weather. It's harder to cover that. But, Palestine's so full of, 180 class fish, basically. I mean, you show up to Palestine with 12.5 pounds at a weigh-in, you're not going to do much, because that's just a bunch of 180s. You ain't going to do nothing with that. But that's going to be standard across the board. And that's pretty much the bulk of what I caught on Port Sunday, was just a bunch of like 160 to 190 class fish. Most of the fish I dropped on were in that range, and that we put in the cooler because he wanted to keep it all. So sure, whatever. Did get 230 within about, based on the map, it was probably within 30 to 40 yards of where I caught the 240 2 weeks ago. So that I found that kind of interesting. So I have an area, I might be able to funnel down instead of them being so scattered out with all the timber you get on fourth.
We're gonna call it,
water maybe.
we're gonna call it the Remillard Ridge.
But
You got Jeremy's Ditch and now Remillard's Ridge, huh?
right. And then there's that other spot over kind of in the Mckay area that's oh God, I can't remember his name. Jerry's partner.
Hollow Bear.
Yeah. Jordan mentioned it on one of the trips I went with him. He talked about, his creek or O'Bear's Creek or Paul's Creek or whatever they phrased it over there. And it's like, it's over by that like Shotgun McGee area. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, right off that real tall boat ramp. Or boat.
I think
dock.
so. That sounds right. But, everybody's got names for everything. The bulk of the fish that I found that were better quality were in that like 14-foot range. I don't know, 12 to 16 foot maybe. And I assumed, which I found interesting because, it was 65-degree water. I'm like, okay, they'd be up shallow, but if I stay out a little deeper, it's a little easier with someone who's never used live scope. If it's a little bit deeper water, give them time, and I had them on a quarter instead of like, I run a half ounce and 3/8. So it drops fast and I can actually push it to the fish and it just helps a little more. And I think, I like it. I had, Mr. P tied me up some 3/8. He had a jig for a 3/8 jig head and he tied me up some gray ghost in that. So you can't use a gray ghost. You're wasting your time. I'm just saying.
Oh, I've never put one on. You gave me a couple.
You're gonna have to try one out.
They're still sitting in my jig box. I ain't tied them on yet.
Quit.
You're gonna have to try one out, Lieutenant Dan.
Well, you ought to be using. I'm telling you.
I know.
The last two grips, like literally all my rods have them, and then I think I have a money maker tied on one just for a different color, and that's it. They're all gray ghosts in different sizes.
I know.
That's not a thing. Anybody who's ever talked to me knows that.
That's a good segue. I want to go into. So the next question I got, y'all, is when and if do you ever use minnows? Do you ever grab them?
Clients.
Tournaments. Just because you never know. If I get on a fish that I'm like, that's a freaking giant and it won't eat what I have, I stick a minnow on there and drop it down. Just for that reason. Otherwise, I don't use minnows.
So you still bring them just in case?
Just in case. And like, I know it was, I think it was Palestine or Tyler, one of the last two tournaments. Like, literally, I was like, man, do you want to get minnows? Asking Josh. And he's like, you think we're going to need them? I'm like, no, but what if? He's like, okay. So I bought, a half a pound because I always overbuy everything. He's like, we're going to use like 6 minutes, right? And I'm like, it'll be fine. Okay. I think we use 3 minutes. Like, that's it.
But did they catch them?
Yeah. They caught the fish and that's why you buy it.
Yeah.
That's why I do it because it's strictly, it's practically a guaranteed that fish will eat. It's not guaranteed, but it's about as close as you can get.
It's the insurance policy.
Plenty of times you drop a minute in there and they don't even look at it or flinch or nothing, but that's all. That's usually heat of the summer is when I have that problem.
Yeah, I'll use them a lot more in the summertime, in tournaments than I will in the wintertime. I usually try to pre-fish a tournament. Sometimes I don't have a chance, like Tyler and Palestine. We didn't have a chance to go down and pre-fish. So we got them just in case. Tyler, I don't think any of the fish we weighed in came on a minnow. One fish on Palestine did, right, Mckay?
Yeah.
I think one fish, and it was at the very end of the day.
It was the last resort.
But during pre-fishing, I like to try to see what jig I can duplicate the same bite on with a minnow, and then I start resorting to that. Now it does change day to day, and you got to adapt. You can't just say, "Well, this bait's going to work no matter what," because yesterday the minnows was getting the same reaction as this bait, and you can stick with that if you have the confidence, but you can't be afraid to adapt.
Yeah.
Right. Always change baits if you ain't getting the right kind of bite. And like I base it on, and I pointed this out the last 2 trips I did because the guys that were with me 2 weeks ago was the head coach of my son's team that I I coach with, and then Sunday was a buddy of mine who runs his cattle on this other half of my property over here. And I told them both, I said, look, that right there is how you know you have the right combination, and it's when that jig or hook or whatever you're using is down in the mouth and not out on the tip of the lips. If they eat it and it's down in there, I know for a fact I don't need to change.
Yep.
And then I'm
That's
good. And so
that's a
that's
good
why, again,
tip.
like I said, I have that one jig that's a different color, usually in a quarter ounce, whatever size range I'm using. And I've got 16th to 3/8 on my rods, but I've got one that's a different color just in case I drop on a fish with Old Faithful and it just follows it up and doesn't eat it or something. After that's all there is to it. I'll change the color, and that's going to be my first step is change color. The next step is I'll change profile. So I'll go from a 3/8. And of course, it all depends on depth. If I'm fishing deep water, I try to stay heavy just to get it down there. I hate waiting. I don't have time. Okay. I need to move. I mean, whatever. So I'll go from a 3/8 and I'll drop to an 1/8 ounce or even a quarter if I need to, and that's the thing. Actually, I take that back. I would drop to a quarter because as far as the premier jigs are concerned, if you look at the profile of the quarter ounce and the 1/8 ounce, they're identical. The only difference is the size of the head. So if I can fish a quarter, I'm going to fish a quarter because it's just easier. It sinks faster. I get down to the fish faster, whatever.
Right.
So I have lots of jigs in every size. I mean, we're all the same. I've got more than most. But I don't really use an 1/8 ounce very often. I'll go from a 3/8 when I can get them to eat it. Otherwise, I fish a quarter most of the rest of the year, except in like the summer, then I'll drop to a 16th, or a 32nd or something. But usually 16th is about as small as I go. But I mean, most of the time, if you get the right presentation with the right profile, they're going to eat it no matter what color it is. It doesn't matter. They'll just eat it.
One of the things that I've
yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed, and I try to push Lieutenant Dan out in these tournaments, is when we're dropping and using smaller jigs a lot, or kind of some medium sized profiles. We try to remind him, hey, you really like a big profile, right? And he's got some of those G Daddy ones that aren't released yet that we just love those. Every single time Dan puts one on there, he's catching that fish every time. So,
oh yeah,
and that's a little, not being a full time angler like you guys are, that's something that was a little hard for me to get used to, Dan, is when you started all of a sudden pulling out these massive profile plastics. I'm like, what are you doing with that? But it worked, right? And now it's my favorite go-to to tell Dan, hey, mix it up, throw something big on there. They love the big ones.
The good thing about big baits that people don't realize is a small bait, a crappie, can just kind of open its mouth and just suck that bait in. A big bait, they actually have to attack it. So, and they attack it nose first. They're not going to eat it backwards. There's too many fish in the water that have spines that will hurt their throat and stuff. So they do it head first, and presenting that bait above them and allowing them and pushing that bait. If you push a big bait into a fish, and I'll do it this way, it's your hook's here and you're pushing that bait, it's going to follow that line head first. And where the head of that crappie is, and you push it in, it's already facing that crappie. So he can already just go head first at it and you're on, versus pulling it away or pulling it up from the fish. It's having to go back behind that fish and eat it from the front. And a big bait's a lot easier to do that with. And, to me, they hit it harder, and it doesn't always work depending upon the time of year. If all the bait they're eating small, like in the summertime, you got all the fry out and they're used to, 1 inch and 1.5 inch ghost minnows or small threadfin, real tiny. They're not going to eat a 3, 4, 5 inch bait. But this time of year, when they're just choking 3 inch and 5 inch, threadfin shad all day long, that's what they're used to, and that's what they're going to want to eat. So that big bait is deadly, but it is seasonal.
I got a question for y'all. So recently on crappieco.com, we released an article about being a tournament crappie angler, right? And how to be one. And it had some tips in there about being one. So I want to ask y'all, if anybody's wondering or thinking about getting into competitive crappie fishing, is there any advice or anything that you think people should know before they jump into it, or prerequisites to learning how to be a competitive angler?
I
So,
would first go ahead, Damon.
I mean, show up.
Yeah,
I
show up.
mean,
That's
obviously, yeah. I mean, you're going to be at the back of the pack if you don't have at least like live scope or something. It gives you that much of an
Yeah.
advantage for sure. Absolutely. Not saying you can't win without it. That's been proven in crappie matches down in Florida. But it's a major advantage. I mean, literally, I crappie fished for most of my life. Once I got out of high school, even in high school, I kind of shifted from like bass fishing mainly and started targeting more crappie and then I fished the spawn and I fished in the summer and that was it. I never fished any of this winter stuff. Me and water don't get along well in the cold. I was deer hunting all winter. And, 2 years ago, Josh, we were working at Stiller and he was like, "Hey, you want to go fish this tournament?" And I'm like, it's cold. Like, that's January, bro. And that was that 17-degree day on Pines. And I'm like, you really want to put me in this? Like, I don't do cold and water. All right. Like, that's just not me. I don't have most of the gear for it or any of that. I mean, I got clothes here. I got all my hunting gear, but I don't wear my camo except to hunt. I'm all about scent control, all that stuff. And since then, I haven't hunted. The last 2 seasons, I haven't even shot my bow.
He's
I
hooked.
strictly go,
You choked it.
and I just kind of, I wanted to get, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's all the way back here. And, but like I wanted to focus on it and really get that much better because I had a lot of ground to make up. We fished that first 2 tournaments or the first tournament there on Pines. I didn't even have live scope. Josh did. I didn't know how to do it. So literally we're out there on Pines and I was like, dude, I'm not going to try to learn this during a tournament. You fish that. And we took one of my Be Ready rod holders and mounted it to his boat. And I trolled off the side as he moved around. As it had rods hanging off the side with different lengths and minnows and jigs and everything. And that's how I fished that first tournament.
How'd that
Then
do?
I got live scope. I think 1 or 2 of the fish I caught off of those rods, we ended up weighing in.
There you go.
So it worked out. And so I'm real conscious about doing that if we're in the deeper water, when it's not, because we were out in like mainly open water on Pines for that trip. We were not down by the dam, but kind of close to it. I'd never been to the lake before. I didn't know anything about it. He was like, well, he talked to some guy who used to be a guide there who his buddy holds the record for a white crappie on that lake.
Yeah.
And because he took him and put him on that fish, and then he broke it the next year, but didn't weigh it in because he wanted his buddy, his cousin or uncle or whoever, to keep the record. And Josh knows that guy, and so he called him and was like, "Hey, what do we need to do?" He said, "Man, I fish over here." Okay, let's go. It worked out. The next tournament was Palestine. That was our first trip to Palestine. Just kind of live started, and hey, relax. And I didn't know what an open water crappie looked like. That's how bad it was. So I'm sitting there, right on the north end of that 155 bridge where everybody fishes, and Josh was like, "Go fish," because I pre-fished it. He didn't have a chance to pre-fish, and I went out there and fished. I didn't catch a single crappie all day, and I caught a 6.5 pound hybrid on one of those 14. No, that was on my Ozarks when I was still fishing the Ozarks. The little
the rear seat Ozark.
Yeah, the rear seats. Yeah, the big old limber things. And that's all I caught, and I was like really nervous. It ended up being our worst tournament that year, but still, I was like, I didn't catch a single fish. This is bad, And then we drop in the same spot. He's like, "Let's just go run that again." And he starts dropping on these marks on the screen. But again, I'd had live scope like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'd only been able to fish like once or twice previous to that. So I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And he drops on this fish and pulls it out. I'm like, "That's a crappie?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Well, I wish I'd have known that. I'd have caught more fish yesterday." But I remember seeing all them going, "What is all this? I don't know what this is. It doesn't look like a fish. Crappie stick to timber." That's all. I'd never caught open water crappie. Never done any of that. So it's definitely a learning curve, but I had a lot to catch up to. And so once I got it, and I started with, it was a 93 with GLS 10 and everything. And within So that was right before Palestine, and before Fork, I had a 12-inch. I found a guy selling a 12-inch over in Fort Worth, and he went to a 16
Yeah.
and snagged that. And I've been fishing as hard and fast and possible as I could. I'm just
I've
trying to
seen
learn,
you at
you know.
every tournament, but I think that's a big part of it, right? Being consistent, showing up. The article largely talks about, nothing beats time on the water, right? The experience you gain about time on the water. Reading that article and going through it shares the information about the tournaments don't pick the weather, right? Your clients might. So crappie guides, y'all's clients might actually end up pulling out when the weather's bad or just too cold or it's too rainy or it's winter, right? And it slows down on crappie guides, but the tournaments don't. You still got a tournament, right? So how are you going to learn how to fish that tournament in the winter, in the rain, everything freezing, right?
And
Running a space heater and on your feet just to keep your toes alive, right? But it's because you got to get out there. You got to get out there during those elements because the crappie are still there, but you got to understand and learn how do they behave during that in that environment, right? Because they're not going to act the same as a normal day. Lieutenant Dan, what do you got about it?
I mean, Damon nailed it as far as showing up. You got to show up. You got to pay your dues. By pay your dues, I mean, be respectful to everybody. If someone's there, help them out if they need help. I'm big on if you're on the water and someone needs help, help them because you never know when you need help. And I'm real big on that. I truly feel like the crappie world is a real good brotherhood. They tend to help each other a lot more. If you got questions, you can stand around weighing asking people what they did, and they tell you, 100%.
Yeah.
Hey, I was over in this area. Doesn't matter if we're going to be back there the next year or not. There might be 20 boats in that area. You won it the year before, but guess what? Whether you tell them or not, they're still going to be there.
Yeah.
So you might as well just share your knowledge and build the sport and help it grow. And then, I mean, that's a lot of times that's how I got to where I'm going. Or where I am now is asking questions to people. I'm not afraid to ask questions, but I'm also not afraid to give out information. You can't just take and not give. There's a lot of people in the fishing industry that will call and ask you questions, but they're not going to give you 2 cents if you need it. They just want to take and not give. Crappie industry, not really as much as most of the other fishing industries. And, a lot of people have left other fishing industries to join the crappie industry because of that. And I think showing up and doing your part is a huge thing. Other than that, as far as equipment, like Damon said, you are going to need live scope and you are going to need to be efficient with it. When you get live scope, you're going to drop on everything. And I highly recommend drop on everything till you figure out what it is.
Yeah.
Because there's certain situations that it could be a crappie.
That's some good advice. I remember when we first started using it, there was a lot that we did not think was crappie. And
I know you were on the boat the first day I had it, almost 3 years ago to the day.
We missed a lot of marks because we didn't think they were crappie. So
drop man, that's way too big. There's no way that's a crappie.
Yeah.
You're thinking a crappie is this little fish compared to a bass, and you see these,
and that's true. I had never seen crappie as big as what we're catching now until we got live scope and started competing competitively. I always thought brush piles, those eaters, that was crappie, right?
Well, you were also used to teenager brush pile fishing on Ray Robert.
Right. It completely changed my understanding of what a crappie is once we started competing.
Right. Yeah. And there's a big difference. A 10-inch crappie is going to be a little bit bigger than your bait.
Yeah.
On live scope. It's just a hair bigger than your bait. And then you get on a 2-pound crappie and it's the size of a nickel, it is giant. It's like a BB versus a nickel almost. And it's a huge difference. So highly recommend drop on everything. Doesn't matter. You'll catch giant catfish. You'll catch giant gar. You'll catch giant drum.
It'll still be fun.
Drum look a lot like a crappie on live scope. Sometimes you can see that tail definition. Sometimes you can't. Other times, the way you can tell a drum is a drum will come up to a bait and they'll actually turn down like that and look at the bait, versus a crappie will come up and look up at it. So this is the head right here, the nose. A drum will either come parallel with it and look at it facing forward, or turn like this 90% of the time. At some point in your presentation of your bait, it will do that. Now, it still will follow a bait up and eat it up like a crappie will, but at some point, it's either going to look directly at the bait or even turn down a little bit to look at the bait. And that's one way you can tell a drum from a crappie. If it's stuck on a tree, good luck. You're going to catch drum.
That's one of the things that the big signs that you taught me when we were competing was the crappie will turn up, right? And it reminds me of almost like a golden retriever waiting for you to throw that ball, right? They're looking at that jig, right? And they're sitting there waiting for that jig, and then they hit it, right? But that's what they remind me of. So, if you're having trouble,
block of cheese on the dog, and he's just waiting there.
So if you're not quite sure what you're dropping in on, just look for that golden retriever behavior. If it does it, that's a crappie.
Exactly. Now I have seen crappie. We were fishing nationals at Lake D'Arbonne. What was that? 2020, maybe 21. Yeah, 2021. And I was frustrated. I couldn't get these fish to bite, and I just finally threw my rod down on the deck, right? And my bait went into the mud. I mean, the fish was 4 foot off the bottom. My bait went in the mud. I go and pick it up, and the fish is on it. And I'm like, what? That's crazy to me. And so the next fish wouldn't bite. He wouldn't bite. I just dropped it in the mud, watched that fish go right down into the mud, pick my bait up, and I set the hook. And I had a pattern from there. I can't get these fish to bite, but they're going down in the mud to eat it. That helped us out a lot.
We didn't do too bugs. Well.
Yeah, they eat. I mean, it's Louisiana. There's crawfish, right?
Yeah.
So that turned me on to a pattern of getting them to bite. It wasn't necessarily a pattern of the fish, because I was on the pattern of the fish. It was just getting them to bite. And unfortunately, it was too late in the tournament, and I figured that out and couldn't recover from it. But it just try different things with your bait presentations. Damon's got one bait that he absolutely loves, and he won't tie anything else on unless it fails. That's a good thing. I have every color imaginable of crappie baits. Hand ties, soft plastics, profiles, everything. From little tiny 3/4 inch baits all the way to 5-inch baits.
On the boat.
On the boat. I mean, I got 100 pounds worth of tackle on the boat. Yeah. There's a reason my boat doesn't do 74 anymore, and it's because of tackle. Yeah. And I might use the same 5 baits year round.
Yeah.
I literally have one bait tied on one of my rods. Now I've retied it multiple times because of the line damage, but I've had the exact same bait. I mean, like the same jig head and the same soft plastic, same body, everything. I didn't change out the bait at all. It's the exact same bait. And I put it on like January 6th, and it's still on my boat. I run guide
plastics that you use.
Yeah, that's the G Daddy plastics. There's over 1,000 fish on this one plastic.
David, do you use those too?
I definitely have them. I have used them.
Yeah.
And they are tough as crap. I mean, it's ridiculous. My thing is, I used to do it where I'd have some rods with plastics and some rods with hair jigs. And I thought I would like plastics. When I started doing all this, and not even tournament fishing, but just fishing, no matter what, I used literally just a couple of colors and the Pro Angler Tackle Rocky Top tube jigs, where the skirts are actually, that have a little ripple on the skirt. I've used the black and chartreuse and white and chartreuse and the 2-inch for most of my crappie career. I mean, And that goes back all the way to as soon as I found them, I was like, hey, let me try these. And they were thicker than a standard tube jig. They're tough. They're solid at the head, so they don't tear off as easy. And I still have, they're still in the boat. I've got a whole, bait binder that is nothing but tube jigs in every shape, size, and color you can imagine. And I have a whole nother one that's nothing but like shad profiles in every shape, size, and manufacturer you can imagine. Especially because all them raffles I win, I always win the bait packs in the raffles. So I've got so many of them.
Yeah. That's frustrating.
Raffle, I see your name there and you're winning something.
I'm sitting there. I want some hand tie jigs so bad, but Damon's always gotten them. He's always hauling them off.
Yeah, and they're all still sitting in those same bags for the most part. I pulled a few out and put them in the box that goes in my bag to fit tournaments and stuff, but I've got probably 8 or 10 gallon freezer bags that are just stuffed full of stuff that I've won in raffles. And I go through and I pick out what I'll use, and the rest of it goes back in the bag. And that's one of the things I'm going to try to do this year. And I said I'd do it last year, and I didn't get around to it. But since I redid the boat and I cleaned all that crap out of my compartments and everything, I'm going to try to remember for the junior angler tournament and just donate all that back to give it away to them, because I'm not going to use it. Why keep it? I have no use for it.
Yeah, right? No, that's good. That's good. The kids will love that. The last question: what's the weight going to be for fork this time? And who is y'all's money on?
Me, man, me.
Of course. I mean, it can be the one time we finally do good, and like you said, we won't be in Coosa. It'll be that's how it's going to work. We're going to get like 19.5 pounds or something, something ridiculous.
Man, 19 steep, dude. That's a 270 average.
I know.
What was it last time? What was the last weight on fork?
On fork, last tournament on fork was at state championship. Was it 14 average? Like a 14-20 average?
I think we landed somewhere 13, didn't we?
It was one of the first tournaments on fork that didn't bust 15.
Yeah.
Um.
So what are y'all thinking? 15 and a half this time?
1275 and we were in fifth.
Yeah, we had 1260 and we were in sixth.
Well, David, you've been fishing it. You've been fishing it. So what are you thinking?
Right behind y'all. What's that?
Damon's been fishing it. So what are you thinking? You thinking people are going to bring in a bunch of 2.5 pounds? Easy?
I think it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
I mean, the last 2 trips I did, I fished roughly the same area, just different sections, so to speak. And I funneled it down because I had my buddy with me who wanted to actually keep fish. So I was like, okay, let's try to knock a limit out real quick, and then we'll just start hunting for big ones in the same area. And I mean, again, the first trip 2 weeks ago was a 240 with our big fish. Sunday was a 230, 233, something like that. But I mean, if you could, I don't know, 16.
16.
I'm
big number.
5, I think, will be fairly achievable. I don't see why it wouldn't be, unless people just have a really bad day. And there's too many people fishing that lake that always fish that lake. We all know who they are.
It's a competitive lake. Sorry, Lieutenant Dan.
I mean, I don't see there not being, 16 will be at the very, very top. I can go really stretch it and be like, it's going to take that to hit like top 3, but I don't think it's that bad.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm close to thinking that. I think it's going to be a 235, 240 average with a 290 kicker. So it's going to put you over close to 17 pounds, 16 and a half to 17 is what I'm thinking. So
you think we'll see 3 pounds? I bet somebody comes in with 2 3-pounds.
I think people will save the 3-pounders for next weekend for Crappie Fest.
I don't think they're going to.
With the exception of the people who are just worried, that aren't fishing Crappie Fest or don't think about it. They're like, ooh, I want to win the tournament. They drop on that giant. Which I can tell you right now, if I see a 3-pounder, I'm dropping on it. I don't care.
Oh, no, me too.
There ain't no leaving nothing, I told both of the last trips I did, I was like, I want y'all both to know, because it was my buddy and his dad. I was like, hey, if we stick a 3-pounder or a 295 on my scale, this trip is over and we are going to the minute. I just want you to know this. We're getting this thing certified. Good pictures, certified, and then I'll release it back in the lake and put a magnet on it and put a brick of steel at the bottom so I can go back and catch it next time.
Well, Dan, we are out of time. We've got less than a minute, but I do appreciate y'all jumping on with us on our first video podcast tonight. And we'll hold these. We'll get a routine going where we're doing them weekly, and I'll have some topics ready to ask y'all. And yeah, it'll be fun. All right, bye everybody. Good luck with y'all's tournaments. Bye.
All right, later, guys.